The cold hospital floor pressed against my knees as I covered his body with mine. Blood spread between us, warm and sticky, and I could not tell whose it was anymore. His chest barely moved under my hands. Gunshots echoed down the corridor, closer now. And I pressed my forehead against his shoulder and whispered, "Stay with me," even though he could not hear. 3 years ago I married this man. He does not know. I never showed up to meet him, and now I am dying to save him. 3 years ago I signed papers, took money that saved my dying mother, and ran across the country. I changed my name, I hid. And tonight he walked into my unconscious from a car accident, and I did not recognize him because I never looked at his face. Then a shooter came. I threw myself over him, and the universe just made me pay for running. Tell us which country you are watching from. I love knowing how far these stories travel. Now let's continue. Let me go back. Let me tell you how a girl becomes a ghost. My mother was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer when I was in my 2nd year of nursing school, no insurance. The bills came faster than I could breathe. I took extra shifts. I sold everything we had. It was not enough. It is never enough when the system is designed to break you. Someone told me about agencies that arrange marriages for wealthy families. Contracts, they called them. Business arrangements. The rich needed something. You needed money. Everyone walked away clean. It sounded like something from a movie. It sounded impossible. But I was desperate, and desperate people do not ask questions. They just sign. Alexander Sterling needed a wife to satisfy his grandmother's will. She left him the company, billions of dollars, but only if he married before 30. His 30th birthday was 3 months away. He did not want a real marriage. He wanted a signature and a social security number. The agency promised me $200,000. Half up front, half after 1 year of marriage. After that, a quiet divorce and I walk away. My mother gets treatment. He gets his inheritance. Everyone wins. I met with lawyers 3 times. I never met him. He was too busy, they said. Traveling. Running his empire. It did not matter. This was not about feelings. I signed the papers on a Tuesday afternoon in November. They handed me a check. They handed me an envelope with his photo and told me I should probably know what my husband looked like. I put it in my bag. I went to the hospital and paid for 6 months of my mother's treatment up front. And then I went home and I panicked. I sat on my bathroom floor and I thought about what I had just done. Married a stranger, sold my name, sold my future, for money. My mother did not raise me like this. She raised me to be honest, to work hard, to never take shortcuts. And here I was, Mrs. Lily Sterling, bought and paid for. I was supposed to meet him the following week. A dinner, they said. Somewhere private. We would discuss expectations. Living arrangements. Public appearances. I stared at that sealed envelope every day. I could not open it. If I saw his face, he would become real. This would become real. And I was already drowning in regret. 3 days before the dinner, my mother took a turn. Infection. Sepsis. I spent 72 hours in the ICU with her, holding her hand, watching machines breathe for her. She survived. Barely. And I realized I could not do this. I could not sit across from a billionaire and pretend to be his wife while my mother fought for her life. I could not be in 2 places at once. I could not be 2 people at once. So I ran. I sent an email to the agency saying I needed more time. Then I turned off my phone. I took my mother home when she was stable enough. And I started applying to jobs across the country. I did not tell anyone where I was going. I used my maiden name on applications. I became Lily Harrison again. I left Lily Sterling behind like a costume I tried on once and hated. Seattle hired me 3 weeks later. ER nurse, night shift. I took it without hesitation. My mother was in remission by then, living with my aunt in California. I sent her money every month from my hospital paychecks. She thought I was just working hard. She did not know I was hiding. She did not know her daughter was a wife and a runaway all at once. I never opened that envelope. I threw it away the day I left. If I did not know his face, I could pretend he did not exist. I could pretend I did not steal from him. Because that is what I did. I took his money and I disappeared. The contract said I owed him a year. I gave him nothing. I told myself he was rich, that the money meant nothing to him, that he probably forgot about me immediately. Rich men do not chase after girls like me. But sometimes late at night I would search his name online. Alexander Sterling, CEO of Sterling Industries. 33 now. Tall, dark hair, cold eyes in every photograph. He never smiled. There were articles about his business deals, his mergers, his ruthless negotiation tactics. There was nothing about a wife. Nothing about me. I was a ghost in his life too. Maybe that meant I was safe. Maybe that meant he never cared enough to look. For 3 years I lived like this. Quiet, careful. I did not date. I did not make close friends. I worked my shifts and I went home and I told myself this was enough. Saving lives was enough. I was good at my job. Patients loved me. My colleagues respected me. I built a small life out of borrowed time and a stolen name. And I almost convinced myself I was happy. Tonight started like any other Friday night shift. Via was busy but manageable. Car accidents, a broken arm, chest pains. I was triaging a teenager with a sprained ankle when they brought him in. The paramedics were shouting vitals. Male mid-30s, car accident, head trauma unresponsive. I looked up and I saw a man in an expensive suit covered in blood and shattered glass. I did not see a face. I just saw work. We got him stabilized. Court scan showed no brain bleed, just a concussion. Lacerations, broken ribs. He would be fine. I cleaned the glass from his skin and stitched the cut above his eyebrow. My hands were steady. They are always steady. He was unconscious the whole time. I did not look at his face longer than I needed to. Just another patient. Just another Friday night. I was finishing his chart when I heard the first shot. It was far away, down the corridor. I thought maybe something fell, but then I heard screaming. And then I heard more shots. And the charge nurse was suddenly on the intercom saying code silver, active shooter, lockdown procedures in effect. My hands stopped being steady. Everyone moved at once. Patients into rooms. Doors locked. Lights off. I heard someone say it was a domestic situation. A man looking for his ex-girlfriend who worked in the ER. She had a restraining order. He did not care. I thought about all the times we talked about this in training. Active shooter protocols. Run, hide, fight. I never thought I would actually need them. And then I remembered room 12. The car accident patient, still unconscious, still on a gurney. They were supposed to move him to imaging. I ran to the hallway. His gurney was there, abandoned. Everyone had scattered too fast. And I could hear footsteps, heavy boots, getting closer. I could hear someone shouting, asking where she was, using a name I did not recognize. The shooter was coming. I could hide. There was a supply closet right behind me. I could lock myself in and wait for SWAT. That is what training said. Preserve your own life first. But I looked at him lying there, helpless, and I thought about my mother in that ICU bed 3 years ago. I thought about how I spent my whole life running away from hard things. And I thought, not this time. I ran to him. I unlocked the gurney wheels. I tried to push, but he was heavy and the wheels caught on something. The footsteps were so close. I heard a door slam open nearby. I heard him shouting again. And I made a choice. I threw myself over the patient's body. If the shooter came around the corner, maybe he would see a nurse protecting a patient and move on. Maybe he would not shoot someone already down. Maybe I could buy time. That is when the shot came close. Too close. I felt something hot slice across my back. Not a bullet. Shrapnel. The wall exploded behind us. Plaster and metal rained down. I pressed tighter against him, my cheek against his shoulder. His cologne was expensive. I remember thinking that was a strange thing to notice while dying, and then I felt his chest move. He was breathing. He was alive. I was keeping him alive. I do not know how long we stayed like that. Seconds. Minutes. Time stopped meaning anything. I could hear SWAT arriving. I could hear commands being shouted. I could hear the shooter saying something I could not understand. And then I heard a single shot. Different. Final. And then silence. The kind of silence that means it is over. Someone pulled me off him. Police officer. Asking if I was hit. I could not answer. My back was on fire. I could not feel my legs. He was asking my name. I said Lily Harrison. He wrote it down. He asked if I knew the patient. I said no. Just a John Doe from a car accident. He nodded. He moved on. I did not tell him I was lying. I did not tell him that I knew exactly who this man was, even though I had never seen his face before tonight. The paramedics came. They tried to separate us. They wanted to take me to a different ambulance. But he woke up then. His eyes opened. Gray. Storm gray. They found my face immediately. He tried to sit up and winced. I told him to stay still. I told him he had a concussion and broken ribs. He asked what happened. I said there was a shooting. I said he was safe now. He looked at me like he was trying to understand something. Then he said, "You covered me. You saved me." I tried to move away. My back screamed. The paramedic pushed me down gently. They cut my scrubs. I heard someone say the wound was deep. Not life-threatening, but deep. They needed to irrigate and close it properly. The hospital was still on lockdown. No one in or out until SWAT cleared every room. They were setting up a triage area right here in the corridor. We were not going anywhere. He kept looking at me. Even while they were treating him, stitching his wounds, stabilizing his ribs, he watched me. I tried not to look back. But then he said, "What is your name?" And I could not ignore him. I said, "Lily." He said, "I am Alexander." "Nice to meet you, Lily." And I thought, this is it. This is where he recognizes me. This is where 3 years of running ends. But his eyes showed nothing. No recognition. Just gratitude. Just curiosity. He did not know me. The lockdown lasted 4 hours. They moved us to a supply room once the corridor was needed for critical patients. The shooter had injured 6 people before SWAT took him down. None dead. We were lucky. We were all so lucky. I sat on the floor with my back against a shelf of gauze and antibiotics. Alexander sat across from me, holding an ice pack to his head. We did not talk at first. What do you say to someone after something like that? But eventually he spoke. He said, "You did not have to do that." I said, "Yes, I did." He asked why. I said, "Because I am a nurse." He smiled a little. It changed his whole face. He said, "I think it is more than that." I did not know what to say to that. So I asked him what he remembered about the accident. He said he was driving home from a meeting. Someone ran a red light. After that, nothing. Just waking up to your face. We talked in pieces, small things. He asked how long I had been a nurse. I said 4 years, almost 5. He said he could tell I was good at it. I asked what he did. He hesitated. Then he said he ran a company. I did not push. People who hesitate like that are usually very rich or very private, usually both. I wondered if he knew I knew exactly who he was. But I could not ask without revealing myself. So, I just nodded. He asked if I was in pain. I said yes. He asked if I needed anything. I said I already took something. He said, "Let me see." I said no. He insisted. He stood up slowly, wincing, and moved behind me. I felt his fingers gentle on my shoulder. He said, "This is bad. You need proper stitches." I said I know. He said, "When we get out of here, come with me to my hospital. Better surgeons." I laughed. I said, "Your hospital." He said, "I may have understated my job description." And that is when I knew I was in trouble. Not because he was discovering who I was, but because I was discovering who he was, and he was not the cold CEO from the photographs. He was not the heartless billionaire I built in my mind to justify running. He was careful with me. He was kind. And I was starting to understand what I had actually run away from 3 years ago. Not a prison. A person. The hours passed slowly. We sat. We talked. He told me about growing up with expectations he never chose. I told him about nursing school and my mother. I did not mention the cancer. I did not mention the bills. I kept my truth small and safe. But he seemed to understand anyway. He said, "You are someone who saves people." I said, "I try." He said, "I think you always have." And something in his voice made me look up. He was watching me with those storm gray eyes. And I could not breathe. I asked him if he had someone waiting. A girlfriend. A wife. He looked away. He said, "I was married once. Technically still am. But I never met her. It is complicated." My heart stopped. I tried to keep my face neutral. I said, "That sounds very complicated." He laughed, but it was not happy. He said, "She ran away before I could meet her. 3 years ago. I have been looking for her ever since." I should have stayed quiet, but I needed to know. I asked why he was looking for her. He said, "Because I owe her an apology." I said, "For what?" He said, "For putting her in a position where running felt like her only choice." I said, "Maybe she had her reasons." He said, "I am sure she did. That is why I need to find her. To tell her I understand. To tell her she is free." And my whole world tilted. I said, "You are not angry." He said, "I was." For about a month. Then I realized she gave me a gift. She showed me that the life I was living was not one anyone would choose. Not even for money. It made me look at everything differently. I changed things. The company. Myself. I started wondering who I could be if I was not performing for my grandmother's ghost. And I wanted to thank her for that. For running. For being brave enough to say no. I felt tears on my face before I realized I was crying. He noticed immediately. He moved closer. He said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yes. Just the pain." He did not believe me. He said, "I should not have talked about this." "Not after what you just went through." I said, "No, it is fine. I'm just tired." And I was so tired of running. So tired of hiding. So tired of being someone else. But I could not tell him. Not yet, not like this. The door opened. A police officer said the lockdown was lifted. SWAT had cleared the building. We could go. Alexander stood and offered me his hand. I took it. His grip was warm and steady. He helped me up. My back protested. He noticed. He said seriously, "Come with me. My hospital is 10 minutes away." Better than this chaos? I should have said no. I should have walked away right then. But I took his hand and I said yes. His car was still wrecked, so he called a driver. A black SUV arrived in minutes. He helped me into the back seat. Every movement hurt. He sat beside me. Close, I could smell his cologne again. I could feel the heat from his body. He said, "Thank you for what you did. I could be dead right now." I said, "You are not. That is what matters." He said, "You matter." And I did not know what to say to that. So I just looked out the window and tried not to fall apart. Sterling Medical Center. The sign was enormous and lit up against the night sky. My stomach dropped. He said, "This is mine, well, my family's. Best trauma surgeons in the city. You will be in good hands." I wanted to scream. I wanted to jump out of the moving car, but I just nodded. I said, "Thank you." He said, "It is the least I can do." And we pulled into the private entrance where doctors were already waiting. They took me immediately. A suite, not a room. Private, luxury that did not belong in a hospital. A surgeon came in. She was kind, efficient. She cleaned and stitched my back properly. 37 stitches. She said I was lucky. A few inches different and I would have needed surgery. She gave me prescription pain medication. She said I could go home in a few hours. Just observation. I said, "Thank you." I did not say I had no idea how I would get home without Alexander seeing my address. He came to check on me an hour later. His head was bandaged properly now, his ribs wrapped. He looked better. He sat in the chair beside my bed. He said, "How are you feeling?" I said, "Like I got shot at." He smiled. He said, "Technically you got shrapnelled." I laughed and it hurt. He said, "The surgeon said you were incredibly brave. She saw the trajectory. You definitely saved my life." I said, "We are even then. You saved mine too." He said, "How?" I said, "You gave me a reason to stop running." Just for a moment. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "Can I ask you something?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Do you believe in fate?" I said, "I do not know. Maybe." He said, "I did not. Until tonight. I think maybe some people are supposed to meet. No matter how unlikely. No matter how impossible. I think maybe you were supposed to save me. And maybe I was supposed to save you back." I did not know how to tell him we were already connected. That fate had nothing to do with it. That I had been his wife for 3 years. The door opened. A man in a suit walked in. He looked at Alexander and said, "Mr. Sterling, I am glad you are safe. Your grandmother's attorney called, and your lawyer Marcus is in the waiting room. He wants to confirm you are okay." Alexander sighed. He said, "Tell Marcus I will call him tomorrow." The man said, "He seems insistent. Something about papers you have been carrying." Alexander said, "Fine. Send him in." And I felt the walls closing. Marcus walked in 30 seconds later. 50s. Gray hair. Expensive suit. He looked at Alexander with relief. He said, "Thank God, I saw the news. Car accident and then a shooting." I thought he stopped. He was looking at me. His eyes went wide. He said, "Mr. Sterling, do you know who this is?" Alexander said, "Yes, this is Lily. She is the nurse who saved my life." Marcus said, "Her last name." "What is her last name?" Alexander looked confused. He looked at me. He said, "Harrison, right?" "You said Harrison." I could not speak. Marcus was reaching into his briefcase. He pulled out a folder. He said, "I think you need to see this." And he opened it. There was a photograph, my photograph from 3 years ago. The one I signed the contract with. My face. My name typed underneath. Lily Harrison Sterling. Alexander went very still. He took the folder. He looked at the photo. He looked at me. Back to the photo. Back to me. I watched his face change. Confusion. Understanding. Shock. Anger. Hurt. Everything at once. He said, "Lily Harrison Sterling, you are her." You are my wife. I could not deny it. I could not run. So I just nodded. So I just nodded. I could not deny it. I could not deny it. I could not run. So I just nodded. I said yes. And his face broke. He stood up. The chair scraped back. He said, "You knew. This whole time. Tonight. In the supply room. When I told you about looking for her. For you. You knew and you said nothing." I said, "I did not know how to tell you." He said, "You had hours. You had my blood on your hands. You saved my life and you still could not tell me the truth." I said I was scared. He said, "Of what?" "Of me," I said, "Yes, of you, of this, of everything." He said, "I spent 3 years looking for you. Do you know that? 3 years. I hired investigators. I searched every hospital, every nursing program. I thought maybe you were in trouble. I thought maybe I could help. And you were here. 10 miles from my office, using your real name, working in plain sight. And you let me think I was meeting you for the first time." I said, "I thought you would be angry." He said, "I am angry now." And I could not argue with that. Marcus cleared his throat. He said, "Perhaps I should give you 2 privacy." Alexander said, "No. Stay. Witness this." He looked at me. He said, "Did you spend the money?" I said, "Yes. My mother had cancer." He stopped. He said, "What?" I said, "That is why I signed the contract. She needed treatment. We had no insurance. I was desperate. I took your money and I saved her life. And then I ran because I could not face what I had done." His face changed. The anger was still there, but something else too. He said, "You should have told me." I said, "I did not know you. You were a stranger, a contract." I was 23 and terrified, and I did not know what else to do. He said, "So you disappeared." I said, "Yes." He said, "And tonight, when you saved me, did you know who I was then?" I said, "No. Not until I heard your name. And by then we were bleeding together and it was too late to run again." He sat down heavily. He put his head in his hands. He said, "I do not know what to do with this." Marcus said quietly, "Sir, there is something you should know." Alexander said, "What?" Marcus said, "You have been carrying divorce papers for 2 years, unsigned. You told me you were waiting to find her so you could both sign them and end this properly." Alexander said, "Yes." And Marcus said, "You could have filed without her signature after 1 year of abandonment. You chose not to. Why?" Alexander did not answer. He just looked at me. And I saw something in his eyes I did not expect. Not anger anymore. Something softer. Something that looked like grief. He said, "Because some part of me wanted to meet her first. Wanted to understand. Wanted to..." He stopped. He said, "It does not matter now." "Marcus, give me the papers." Marcus hesitated. Then he pulled them from his briefcase. Divorce decree. All prepared. Just needed 2 signatures. Alexander signed his name. He pushed the papers toward me. He said, "Sign them. You will be free." "Is that not what you wanted?" I looked at the papers. I looked at him. And I realized that somewhere in the last 6 hours I had stopped wanting freedom from him. I had started wanting something else entirely. But I could not say that. Not after lying. Not after everything. So I picked up the pen. I signed Lily Harrison Sterling, my legal name. The name I had not used in 3 years. It felt like signing away more than a marriage. It felt like signing away the person I could have been if I had been braver. I put the pen down. I said, "There. You are free." He took the papers. He folded them carefully. He put them in his jacket pocket. He said, "So are you." And then he walked out. Marcus lingered. He said, "For what it is worth, I think you broke his heart. I said, I did not mean to. He said, no one ever does. He walked to the door. Then he stopped. He said he changed after you left, became obsessed with finding you. Not for revenge. He wanted to apologize. Wanted to give you the choice he never gave you the first time. Wanted to make it right. I think maybe he has been half in love with a ghost for 3 years. And now the ghost is real and she lied to him. That is a hard thing for anyone. I said, what do I do? Marcus said, I am a lawyer, not a therapist. But if I were you, I would figure out what you actually want, not what you are running from, what you are running toward. Then decide if it is worth fighting for. He left. I sat alone in that expensive hospital room. My back hurt. My heart hurt worse. I had just signed away the only man who ever made me want to stop running. And I did not know if I could live with that. They discharged me 4 hours later. Dawn was breaking. I called a cab. I went back to my apartment. Everything looked the same, but I felt different. I felt like I had left something crucial behind at that hospital. I showered carefully, avoiding my stitches. I changed into clean clothes. I sat on my couch. And I cried. For my mother. For the girl I was 3 years ago. For the woman I could have been. For Alexander. For us. My phone buzzed. A text from my supervisor. Are you okay? The news is everywhere. The shooting. You are the nurse who protected the patient. You are a hero. I did not feel like a hero. I felt like a coward. I texted back. I am fine. Need a few days. She said, take all the time you need. I put my phone down. I turned on the TV, and there it was. Breaking news. Hospital shooting. 6 injured. No deaths. And then, Billionaire CEO Alexander Sterling was among those caught in the lockdown. He is safe and recovering. The reporter said, in a stunning turn of events, Sterling has announced a $5 million reward for information leading to the identity of the nurse who protected him during the shooting. She has not come forward and hospital staff are not releasing names. Sterling says he wishes to thank her personally. I stared at the screen. $5 million. To find me, when he already knew exactly who I was. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost did not answer. But something made me. I said, hello. His voice. Alexander. He said, I know you are watching the news. I said, why did you do that? He said, because the world should know what you did. You saved my life. You deserve recognition. I said, I do not want recognition. I stopped. I did not know how to finish that sentence. He said, what do you want, Lily? And I could not answer. So I hung up. He called back immediately. I answered. He said, do not hang up, please. I said, what do you want from me? He said, I want to understand. I want to know why you lied tonight when you had every chance to tell the truth. I said, because I was scared. He said, of me. I said, of losing the moment we had. Of you looking at me differently. Of becoming the woman who stole from you instead of the woman who saved you. He was quiet. Then he said, come to my office. Tonight, 7 p.m. We need to finish this properly. I said, I already signed the papers. He said, I know. But there are things I need to say, things you need to hear. And I think you owe me that much. He was right. I said, okay. He said, I will send a car. I said, no. I will come myself. If I am doing this, I am doing it on my own terms. He said, fair enough. And he gave me the address. I already knew it. I had memorized it 3 years ago when I was researching my escape. Full circle. I spent the day trying to figure out what to say. I wrote speeches in my head. Apologies, explanations, justifications. None of them felt right, because the truth was simple. I ran because I was scared, and then I lied because I was still scared. And now I was about to face the person I had been running from for 3 years. The person who turned out to be nothing like I imagined. The person who made me want to stop running altogether. I took a cab to Sterling Industries at 6:45. The building was glass and steel, tall enough to scrape the sky. I walked through the lobby. The security guard asked my name. I said Lily Harrison. He checked his list. He said Mr. Sterling is expecting you. Top floor. Private elevator. He handed me a key card. I took it. My hand was shaking. He noticed. He said, "Are you okay, miss?" I said no, but I am going anyway. He smiled like he understood something I did not. The elevator was fast and silent. I watched the numbers climb. My reflection stared back at me from the polished walls. I looked tired. I looked scared. I looked like someone who had been running for so long she forgot why she started. The doors opened. Floor 60. Executive offices. Empty at this hour. Just one door at the end of the hall with light spilling underneath. I walked toward it. Each step felt like crossing a border I could never uncross. I knocked. His voice said, "Come in." I opened the door. His office was enormous. Windows overlooking the city. Desk made of dark wood. And Alexander standing by the window with his back to me. He said, "Close the door." I did. He turned around. He looked better than he had at the hospital. Still bandaged but stronger. He said, "You came." I said, "You asked me to." He said, "I did not think you would." I said, "I am tired of running." He walked to his desk. He opened a drawer. He pulled out an envelope. Old. Worn. He said, "Do you know what this is?" I looked closer. My breath stopped. It was the envelope. The one with his photo. The one I threw away 3 years ago. He said, "My investigator found it in a dumpster behind your old apartment. It was never opened. You married me and you never even looked at my face. I did not know what was worse. That I had been running from a stranger. Or that you had too." I said, "I was afraid if I saw you, you would become real." He said, "I was real, I was always real." I said, "No. You were a transaction. A contract. Money for a year of my life. You were not a person to me. You were a solution. And I hated myself for needing you." He said, "So you ran." I said, "So I ran." He put the envelope down. He said, "I want to show you something." And he opened his laptop. On the screen was a folder. Titled Lily. He opened it. There were hundreds of files. Reports from investigators. Photos of me from a distance. Security footage from the hospital where I worked. Timestamps going back years. He said, "I have been looking for you since month 2. At first I was angry. I wanted answers. I wanted my money back. But then I started reading about you. Your nursing school records. Your references. The way patients talked about you online. And I realized you were not a villain. You were just someone who needed help and got trapped." He said, "I found you 4 months ago. Did you know that?" I froze. He said, "I knew you were working at Seattle General under your maiden name. I knew your schedule. I knew where you lived. And I did nothing. Because I realized something. You had made your choice. You chose freedom over money, over security, over me. And that was braver than anything I had ever done. So I decided to let you go. I filed the divorce papers. I just needed one thing before I could move on." I said, "What?" He said, "I needed to see you one more time. Face to face. Not as my wife. Not as the woman who ran. Just as Lily, as a person. I wanted to know if the woman I had been thinking about for 3 years was real. Or if I had built a fantasy. And then the universe gave me a car accident and a shooting and you throwing yourself over me like I was worth dying for. And I got my answer. You are real. You are incredible. And you still do not trust me enough to tell me the truth. I said, I did not know how. He said, you had hours. You had me bleeding in your arms talking about my lost wife like she was someone else. You could have said, I am her. I am here. I am sorry. And I would have. He stopped. I said, you would have what? He said, I would have forgiven you. Right there. In that supply room. Because you saved my life. Because you did not have to. Because when you thought I was just John, some stranger in a car accident, you cared about me anyway. That is who you are. And I fell for that person. I fell for you. Again. I could not breathe. I said again. He said, I fell for you the first time when you ran. Because it meant you had a spine. It meant you were not just going to take my money and pretend. You had principles, even if they hurt me. Even if they hurt you. And then I fell for you again last night when you covered me with your body. When you whispered stay with me like my life mattered more than yours. How am I supposed to walk away from that? How am I supposed to sign papers and pretend I do not feel this? I said, the papers are signed. You have what you wanted. He said, I do not want the papers. I never wanted them. I wanted you. The real you. The one who runs scared and saves lives and lies because she is terrified of being seen. I wanted to know her. And now I do. And I still want her. I said, you do not know me. He said, then let me. Stay. Stop running. Give me one real chance. Not a contract. Not an arrangement. Just us. Figuring it out. Together. I said, what if I hurt you again? He said, you will. I will hurt you too. That is what people do. But we try anyway. Because the alternative is spending the rest of our lives wondering what if. I said, what if this is just adrenaline? Trauma bonding. What if in a month you realize I am not worth this? He smiled. Sad and soft. He said, Lily, I have been thinking about you for 3 years. I almost died last night, and you were the only thing I wanted to hold on to. This is not adrenaline. This is inevitability. I felt my walls breaking. All the fear I had carried for 3 years. All the lies. All the running. It was too heavy. I was so tired. I said, I do not know how to do this. He said, neither do I. We will figure it out. I said, I do not even know if I can stay in one place. He said, then I will come with you. Wherever you run, I will follow. Until you are ready to stop. And something in his voice told me he meant it. This man who had everything would give it all up to chase a woman who ran from him. I said, why do you care this much? He said, because you saw me when I was no one. When I was just John in a hospital bed, you did not see money or power or a name. You just saw someone who needed help. And you helped. That is the person I want in my life, not someone who wants me for what I have. Someone who wants me because of who I am. And I think maybe you do. Even if you are too scared to admit it. He was right. I did see him. In that supply room. In the dark, bleeding, and honest. I saw a man who apologized for something that was not his fault. Who wanted to free me instead of trap me. Who changed himself because someone ran from him. I saw someone worth staying for. I said, I am sorry. For running. For lying. For all of it. He said, I know. I said, I do not know if I can be who you need. He said, I do not need anyone. I just want you. There is a difference. I said the divorce papers. He pulled them from his pocket. He looked at them for a long moment. Then he walked to the window and opened it. Cold night air rushed in. He said, I think these are unnecessary. And he tore them in half. and then in half again. And he let the pieces fly out into the Seattle night. I watched them scatter like snow. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Giving us a chance. No contracts, no papers. Just a choice, every single day. To stay. To try. To see what happens when we stop running." I walked to him. I stood beside him at the window. The city stretched out below us. Millions of lights. Millions of lives. And here we were. Two people who found each other in the worst possible way and somehow made it mean something. I said, "I'm still scared." He said, "Good. That means this matters." I said, "What if I run again?" He said, "Then I will find you again. And again. Until you realize you do not have to." He turned to me. He said, "Marry me." I laughed. I said, "We are already married." He said, "No. That was a contract. A piece of paper. This time I want it to mean something. I want you to choose me. Not because you need money. Not because you are trapped. But because you want to. Marry me for real, Lily. Be my wife because you cannot imagine being anything else." I said, "That is insane. We have known each other for 24 hours. He said, "We have been connected for 3 years. We just did not know it yet." I said, "This is not how this is supposed to work." He said, "Nothing about us has ever worked the way it was supposed to. Why start now?" I said, "People will think we are crazy." He said, "Let them." I said, "I still do not even know you." He said, "So let me tell you. Ask me anything. I have nothing to hide." And for the next hour, that is what I did. I asked him everything. His childhood, his fears, his dreams. The person he was before the contract. The person he became after I ran. And he answered every question with brutal honesty. He told me his grandmother raised him after his parents died. She was cold and exacting. She loved him, but she did not know how to show it except through expectations. Be perfect. Be strong. Marry well. Produce heirs. When she died, she left him everything, but only if he married by 30. It was her last attempt at control. He hated it. He hated her for it. But he did it anyway because he did not know how to disappoint her even in death. He said, "And then you ran." And it was like someone gave me permission to disappoint her, to choose myself. I could have found you easily, forced you to fulfill the contract, taken you to court, but I did not want that. I wanted to be someone worth coming back to. So I changed everything. The company, my life, the way I treated people. I started asking what I actually wanted instead of what I was supposed to want. And the answer was always you. The woman brave enough to say no to me. I told him about my mother. About holding her hand while she coded. About the doctor saying there was nothing more they could do without money. About the agency representative who promised me a way out. I told him I was 23 and terrified and I did not think about consequences. I just thought about saving her, and I did. And then I could not face what I had done to do it. I said, "I told myself you were a monster. That you were using me. That the contract was evil. It was easier to run from a villain than from my own choices. But you were never the villain. I was just too scared to see it." He said, "You were surviving. There is no shame in that." I said, "I stole from you." He said, "You borrowed, and you used it to save a life. That is not theft. That is desperation meeting love. I understand that now." He said, "I want to meet her. Your mother." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because she is the reason we are here. Because she raised someone who values life enough to throw herself in front of bullets. Because I want to thank her for that. I want to tell her that her daughter saved me twice. Once when she ran. Once when she stayed." I started crying again. I said, "She does not know about you, about any of this." He said, "Then let's tell her. Together." I said, What are we doing? He said, I think we are choosing each other. I said, this is insane. He said, probably. I said, people will talk. He said, let them. I said, I am still a nurse. I am still going to work night shifts and come home exhausted and not fit into your world. He said, I do not want you to fit into my world. I want to build a new one, ours, where you save lives and I figure out what I actually want to do with mine. And we meet in the middle. I said, I'm still scared. He said, me too. I said, what if this does not work? He said, then we tried. And that is more than most people can say. I said, I do not want to hurt you. He said, you already did, and I forgave you. That is what people who love each other do. They hurt and forgive and try again. I said, you love me. You do not even know me. He said, I know enough. I know you are brave and terrified and beautiful and broken and you still show up. That is all I need to know. He kissed me, soft, careful of my injuries. Careful of his. It was not a movie kiss. It was real, tentative, testing, asking permission. I kissed him back. I put my hands on his face. I felt 3 years of running stop. Just stop, like I had finally found the place I was supposed to be. And it was not a place at all. It was a person. This person. Who saw all of me. The worst parts. And stayed anyway. When we pulled apart, he said, so is that a yes? I said, to what? He said, to marrying me. For real this time. I said, we are already married, remember? He said, that does not count. I want to do it right. I want to stand in front of people who matter and choose you out loud. I want you to wear a dress you actually picked. I want to say vows that mean something. I want to start over. From this moment. What do you say? I said, I want to do it where we met. He said the hospital. I said the hallway. Where I covered you. Where this became real. I want to stand there and choose you where I first saved you. He smiled. He said, that is perfect. When? I said, as soon as possible. Before I lose my nerve. Before I start thinking too much. Before I convince myself this is crazy. He said, tomorrow. I said, tomorrow. He said, done. And that is what we did. 24 hours later, I stood in the corridor of Seattle General Hospital. The same place where a man with a gun had changed everything. My coworkers were there. They had no idea what was happening. Alexander brought a minister. He brought Marcus, who looked both confused and delighted. My mother flew in. She met Alexander for the first time in a hospital hallway, and she cried and hugged him and said, you are the reason she stopped running. Thank you. I wore scrubs under my dress. Alexander thought it was perfect. He said, this is who you are. This is who I fell for. A nurse who saves people. My wife who saved me. We stood in the exact spot where I had covered him. There was still a mark on the wall from the bullet. A scar. Like the ones we both carried. Proof that we survived something terrible and came out different. Better. The minister said, do you, Alexander Sterling, take Lily Harrison to be your lawfully wedded wife? Not because of a contract, not because of obligation, but because you choose her freely and without reservation. Alexander said, I do. I choose her. Every day. For the rest of my life, I choose her. The minister turned to me. He said, and do you, Lily Harrison, take Alexander Sterling to be your lawfully wedded husband? To stop running. To trust. To build a life together. I looked at Alexander. I said, I do. I choose us. I choose to stay. He kissed me under fluorescent hospital lights while my colleagues cheered and my mother sobbed happily, and somewhere a code was being called because life does not stop for weddings. It was chaotic. It was imperfect. It was real. And it was ours. We walked out of that hospital as husband and wife. For real this time, not because we had to, because we wanted to. Because we chose each other after knowing the absolute worst about each other. And that made all the difference. 6 months later, I am still a nurse. I still work night shifts at Seattle General, but now I come home to Alexander. To our apartment that is half his expensive taste and half my practical chaos. He learned to cook because I am always too tired. I learned to let him take care of me. We are still figuring it out. We argue about stupid things. We laugh about the absurdity of our beginning. We are building something that was never supposed to exist. He started a foundation, medical debt forgiveness, in my mother's name. Because he said no one should have to choose between love and money. Between saving someone and saving themselves. Thousands of families have been helped. My mother works there now. She and Alexander have coffee every Tuesday. They talk about me like I am not in the room. It is annoying. It is perfect. I found the envelope. The one he showed me that night in his office. He kept it in his desk drawer. I opened it finally. 6 months of marriage and I finally looked at the photo of my husband from 3 years ago. He was younger, harder, cold eyes. Not smiling. I did not recognize him. The man I married now smiles. He laughs. He is soft in the ways that matter. That woman who ran 3 years ago, she saved us both. She gave us time to become people worth choosing. Sometimes I still wake up scared. Convinced this is temporary. Convinced I will ruin it. Alexander wakes up too. He holds me. He says, I am still here. You are still here. We are okay. And eventually I believe him. This is what healing looks like. Not perfect, not fast, just consistent, just showing up, just choosing each other even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard. My colleagues still do not understand our story. They say, wait, you married him before you met him. And then you saved him in a shooting. And then you married him again. And I say, yes. It is complicated. They say, that is the most romantic thing I have ever heard. And I think, no. The most romantic thing is that he could have destroyed me. He could have been angry. He could have taken everything. And instead, he chose to see me. Really see me. And love what he found. That is romance. That is real. Last week, we went back to that hallway. Just the two of us. Late at night after my shift, we stood where it happened. Where I threw myself over him, where everything changed. He said, thank you. I said, for what? He said, for being brave when I could not be. For saving me before I knew I needed saving. For running away so I could become someone worth running back to. I said, thank you for finding me. For forgiving me. For choosing me. He said, always. I used to think marriage was a prison, a contract, a giving up of self, but this is freedom. Freedom to be broken and loved. Freedom to be terrified and held. Freedom to mess up and be forgiven. Freedom to choose every single day. Some people meet at coffee shops. We met in blood and chaos and lies. And somehow that was exactly right for us. Somehow that was always how it was supposed to be. They say you cannot run from your problems. But I did. I ran 3,000 miles, and my problem followed me. Turned out my problem was not a problem at all. It was a solution I was too scared to see. It was a person I was too broken to trust. It was a future I did not think I deserved. Running did not save me. Stopping did. Standing still and letting myself be found. That was the bravest thing I ever did. If I could go back and tell that 23-year-old girl something, I would say this. Sign the papers. Take the money. Save your mother. But do not throw away the photo. Look at his face. Because that man, the one you're going to spend 3 years running from, he is going to become the person you run toward. He is going to be your home, and you are going to be his. And it is going to be messy and complicated and absolutely worth it. But you have to stop running long enough to see it. Some prisons are made of contracts. Some are made of fear. And some are made by our own minds when we convince ourselves we do not deserve good things. I lived in a prison for 3 years. I was the architect and the prisoner. And then a bullet flew and I covered a stranger and the walls came down. Sometimes the person you are running from is the person you have been looking for all along. You just have to be brave enough to stop, to turn around, to choose. I stopped running. I chose love. And love chose me back. That is my story. That is us. Now when I walk through that hospital corridor, I do not see the place where I almost died. I see the place where I started living, where fear turned into courage, where a stranger became my husband, where running finally led me home. Alexander says we should get a plaque, something that marks the spot. I tell him that is ridiculous, but secretly I love the idea. A small reminder that sometimes the worst moments become the best ones. That sometimes love finds you when you stop looking. That sometimes the person you think you are hiding from is actually the person who will set you free. The end. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If it reached your heart, even just a little, do not leave without letting me know. A simple heart in the comments is enough. And if you want to feel more stories like this, stories about love that survives everything and souls that find each other against all odds, make sure to subscribe to Dramora Stories. Every story here is a reminder that sometimes the person we run from is exactly the person we need. Sometimes running leads us home. And maybe that is true for you too.